I was halfway through presenting a revised layout strategy for the Reichenwald account when my phone buzzed once. Then again, then 3 more times. My notifications were silenced, but the vibration pulsed like an alarm beneath the polished surface of the conference table. I hesitated. I never checked messages during a pitch, but something, it must have been instinct, told me to glance down. 3 texts, all from Mom. Camarilla, we need to talk about the wedding. There's been a change. You're not invited. Safira doesn't want you there. The words didn't make sense at first. My mind couldn't absorb them. It was like being hit in the chest with a bag of feathers, soft, absurd, but still knocking the wind out of me. I excused myself from the meeting, murmuring something about a family emergency. My heels clicked too fast against the corridor floor. In the bathroom, I locked the door and reread the texts. They hadn't changed. No further context, just a final line. Please respect her wishes. Love, Mom. Love. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I stood in the mirror and stared at a face that looked calm. Too calm. My reflection blinked back at me. Jaw-tight skin, pale. Then I walked out, returned to the conference room and said I needed to leave for the day. No one asked questions. I think they knew not to. Back at my apartment, I sat at my kitchen island and opened the wedding master sheet. File name, Safira, C. Lorenz, wedding, control, Aduri V9, XLSX, $61,700. That was the current total. Paid by me. Venue deposit $25,000. Catering $13,800. Floral design $7,600. Photographer, rentals, decor, transportation, all logged. All me. Not once had I been late with a payment. Not once had I said no, and now I wasn't invited. I closed the file. Then I reopened it. This time I added a new column. Header retractable. Because if they were willing to erase me from the day, maybe I could erase myself from the bill. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. Something cold. Especially when Safira got engaged to Ashlan, a sweet but chronically unemployed jazz guitarist from Charleston. They called it a whirlwind romance. My mother called it a fairy tale. I called it Thursday. When Safira asked if I'd help just a little with the wedding, I assumed she meant coordination, timelines, vendor comparisons. She didn't even pretend past the second planning Zoom. We're dreaming of something elevated but whimsical, she said, flipping her hair over one shoulder like a bridal influencer. Something unforgettable. You've always been so good with spreadsheets. It started with one invoice, then another, then a Venmo request labeled emergency deposit, don't ask LOL. Ashland, for all his charm, contributed enthusiasm and an unfinished SoundCloud playlist. My parents offered what they could, about $5,000 total, but money was tight since Dad's early retirement. The assumption grew like mold. Camarilla can handle it. Of course she can, she always does. I didn't say no, not once. I told myself it was love. That generosity was how I showed care. That helping was my role in the family. Now, sitting in front of a spreadsheet I never agreed to build, reviewing thousands I never planned to spend, I began to realize maybe this wasn't love. Maybe it was a transaction I never consented to. The first time Safira called me her wedding wizard, I actually smiled. It was in a caption under a picture of us at the Denver Botanic Terrace. Me in work flats, her in a flowing sundress she'd borrowed from our cousin. Couldn't do this without my incredible sister, it read. I had just wired $17,000 to secure the venue. That post got over 300 likes. It wasn't just the venue. I handled the floral design, 2 custom terrariums with embedded lights, imported orchids. The vegan caterer came from a client referral, one of the best in the state. Every detail had my fingerprint on it, even if no one saw it. When I asked if I could join the cake tasting, Safira said, it's more of a creative thing. Bridesmaids and design folks. You'd be bored. I almost reminded her that I once designed a 400-person gala on a 6-week timeline, but instead I nodded. It was easier that way. I missed one meeting. Just one. A last-minute crisis at work meant I had to reschedule a phone check-in with the planner. That night, Mom called. Safira's feeling a little Unsupported, she said gently. She says you've been distracted. Distracted. After 77 line items covered, after hours building timelines and calling vendors and negotiating rush fees, I told myself to let it go, to be the bigger person. But 2 days later, I heard it. Safira's voice, loud and careless on a voicemail she didn't mean to leave. She'd forgotten to hang up after a quick question about floral color palettes. Cam's got the money, she was laughing to someone, but not the taste. That's why I'm handling aesthetics. I sat there listening, phone pressed to my ear, my face hot and still. The message ended with a burst of laughter and a dismissive, bless her heart. I didn't delete it. I saved it. That night, I opened my master file and highlighted the new florist upgrades in yellow. My spreadsheet was becoming something else now, less a plan, more a record. A quiet archive of everything they took while pretending it was mine to give. I showed up at the Denver Botanic Terrace without announcing myself. I knew the planner would be on site for final walkthroughs, and I wanted to see it not in photos or through a text chain I wasn't part of, but with my own eyes. I hadn't been invited to any of the in-person meetings despite coordinating and covering the deposits. They said it was easier to handle locally, as if I lived across the country instead of 20 minutes away. The coordinator Elise greeted me with a friendly wave. "Oh, you must be Kamaria," she said, flipping through her clipboard. I just stared at the words like they were written in a language I'd known once but forgot. I scrolled back through old texts, florist invoices, vendor updates, Safira's emoji-laced, "You're the bestest" messages, and felt my chest hollow. They had erased me, not just from the photos, from the whole event. I placed my phone face down on the table, opened my laptop, and found the spreadsheet. I clicked on the tab labeled Master Budget, finalized. Then I created a new sheet beside it. Reversal plan. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen counter with a cup of cooling chamomile, the glow of my laptop soft and steady in the dark. The wedding portal opened with a chime. I knew it by heart, every contract, every timeline, every contingency, all in my name. Venue, Denver Botanic Terrace. I clicked into the reservation and opened the clause I'd highlighted weeks ago. Cancellation permitted with partial refund if more than 72 hours in advance. I checked the date. We had 74. Just enough. I typed the message to the coordinator, keeping it short, polite, final. The reply came within 30 minutes. "We're sorry to hear this, Kamaria. We'll begin the cancellation process today. One down. Florist canceled next. The deposit was non-refundable, but the final balance wasn't due for another 24 hours. I removed the auto payment authorization. The designer emailed back a confused question. I didn't answer. The 3-tier vegan cake, $100, was fully refundable until 48 hours prior. I called, explained briefly, and received a kind but surprised, "Of course. I'll process that now." By mid-morning, I had made 12 calls. Caterer, DJ, rentals, lighting, the watercolor artist, gone one by one. A few tried to ask questions. Most didn't. One florist assistant simply said, "Honestly, good for you." Each confirmation gave me something I hadn't expected: relief, a kind of satisfaction that bloomed not from revenge but from precision. I wasn't burning things down. I was pulling the blueprints from under their feet. When the last cancellation was confirmed, I moved to the cloud drive. 55 files, seating charts, menus, design, mock-ups, RSVP lists, invoices, contracts, photo inspirations. I backed up copies for myself. Then I deleted the entire shared folder. One final task, I opened my phone and blocked every family number. When the screen went still, I closed the laptop and breathed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was order, my order, finally. They noticed faster than I expected. The first voicemail came from Meryl just before noon. "Sweetheart, I think there's been a mix-up with the florist," she said, her tone already teetering. "Call me." By the fifth message, the concern had curdled into accusation. "Kamaria, this is not the time for your moods. You're sabotaging your sister's wedding." 11 calls in 5 hours, all from my mother. I didn't answer a single one. Saphira's name lit up on my screen next, then Ashlyn's, then Saphira again. Then a barrage of texts poured in from a group thread I hadn't opened in days. Bridesmaids, cousins, distant relatives who'd barely spoken to me since Easter, 3 years ago. This is cruel. How could you do this to family? Doesn't she care about appearances? They were furious. Not because I left, but because I took the scaffolding with me when I did. The final call came from Ashlyn. "Cam," he said, and his voice cracked. "Please, just fix this." I picked up once. Just once. It was Saphira. "Why would you do this?" she snapped the second I answered. "You've ruined everything. I'm humiliated." "I didn't ruin anything," I said evenly. "I just stopped paying for it." "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." I almost laughed. "I understand it perfectly. I just decided it's not my problem anymore." "You're being vindictive." "No," I said, "I'm being awake." Then I ended the call and turned my phone off completely. That evening, I booked a solo weekend retreat in Sedona. Nothing fancy, just a cabin tucked into the Red Rocks. No Wi-Fi, no itinerary. I packed a journal, 3 paperbacks I hadn't touched in months, and left before the sun came up the next morning. The drive was long, quiet, and oddly peaceful. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel rage. What I felt was air. Real, unfiltered air I hadn't breathed in years. And as the highway wound through the cliffs, I realized something simple and devastating. The air in Sedona was sharper than I remembered, crisp, dry, untethered to anything artificial. I hiked alone each morning, no destination, no urgency. I left my phone powered off in my bag. No one up there needed to know where I was, and no one who once needed to didn't deserve to anymore. On the second night, I sat by the small fire ring at my campsite, my journal open across my knees. I wasn't writing anything poetic. No grand revelations. Just a list. What I give without being asked. By the time I was done, it stretched across 3 pages. Money, of course. Time. Emotional buffering. Silence. Apologies for things I didn't do. Planning. Discretion. Holidays. Grace. Forgiveness. More silence. Always silence. I stared at the list. The pages felt heavier than they should. I folded them once, then again, and fed the first one into the fire. It curled instantly blackened from the center out. Then the second, then the third. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But there were no tears, only a strange steadiness. The kind that comes not from peace, but from finally understanding what you will never again allow. That night, I reread the last message from my mother, the one that had gutted me more than I admitted at the time. Please respect her wishes. That was all I'd ever done, wasn't it? I stared at the text for a long time. Then I tapped delete. It was small. It was nothing. But it felt like severing a final invisible string. In the morning, I made coffee over the camp stove and watched the steam rise like breath I hadn't let out in years. My mind was quiet. Not empty, just finally uninterested in defending myself to people who'd already decided who I was allowed to be. I stayed 2 more nights, read all 3 books, and filled half the journal with things that weren't about them at all. And when I drove back toward Denver, the silence in the car didn't feel like absence anymore. It felt like space. They made it work. Sort of. The venue became a lakeside rec center outside Castle Pines, booked 2 days before the ceremony. The string quartet was replaced by a Bluetooth speaker on a folding table. Catering turned into a potluck, coordinated by Ashlyn's mother, who brought 3 lasagnas and an ice sculpture, shaped vaguely like a dove. I didn't go, of course. I didn't ask how it went either. But the photos made their way to me. Mutuals tagged cousins, reposted. Saphira uploaded a reel. Her caption was poetic in that brand of vague, sanitized heartbreak. Sometimes family betrays you in ways that have no words. I still chose love. I still chose joy. Comments flooded in. You're so strong. Can't believe what you've been through. The wedding was still magical. No one said my name. But they didn't have to. The phone started ringing again this time, from extended relatives who hadn't reached out in years. Cameria, I just want to hear your side. I'm not judging anyone, I just want the truth. I hope you and your sister can heal someday. I didn't answer. I let every call go to voicemail. I didn't owe anyone a story they weren't ready to believe the first time around. The refunded $22,000 sat in my account for 3 days, just enough time for every family member to try and lay emotional claim to it, even in silence. On the 4th day, I donated all of it to a nonprofit that runs leadership programs for girls in underserved schools. I filled out the donation form in one sitting. Anonymous gift, one-time payment, no public recognition. When the confirmation email came through, I smiled, not because it made the money feel less wasted, but because for once, something I gave didn't come with guilt. They had their wedding. They had their version of events, and I had finally done something for a girl who might grow up thinking her worth wasn't tied to what she gave away. 6 months slipped by without a word. The silence wasn't loud or painful, it was just there like background noise I'd finally stopped tuning into. My days stretched wider now. No more voicemails from Meryl, no more cousin inquiries disguised as concern. My phone stayed quiet, and so did I. Then on a rainy Thursday, a pale green envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name written in Safira's looping handwriting. I opened it slowly, more curious than cautious. Inside was a single folded card with gold foil edges and a watercolor image of lavender sprigs on the front. The handwriting was careful practiced, like she'd rewritten it a few times before settling on this version. Kamaria, I know you're still hurt, but I had to do what was best for my peace. I hope someday you'll understand that. Thank you again for everything you did. I'll never forget it. Safira. That was it. No apology, no admission, just a thank you wrapped in justification like a souvenir from a trip I was never invited on. I laughed quietly, gently, the kind of laugh that didn't come from amusement but from clarity. I folded the card back into its envelope and dropped it into the drawer beside my sink. I didn't throw it away. Not yet. But I also didn't reply. That night, I met June and Aletha for dinner downtown. We didn't talk about weddings or family or betrayal. We talked about June's gallery opening Aletha's new apartment and the insane timing of Denver spring storms. I wore a blazer, charcoal gray, structured, soft at the shoulders. I wore lipstick too, berry, not beige. I used to tone things down for comfort, for proximity, for peace I was always told to preserve. But tonight I wore what felt good. No performance, no apology. And when I laughed at something, Aletha said, head back full and unguarded, I realized the smile on my face hadn't cost me anything at all. It was mine,